Title: We bought a fully renovated mid-century modern for a steal. Yesterday, I found a blueprint that explains why the walls are so thick. I'm typing this from a motel room off I-95. The blinds are drawn. I've shoved a chair under the doorknob. My wife, Sarah, is sleeping in the other bed, but I don't think she's really sleeping. Her breathing is too rhythmic, too perfectly timed. Every 4 seconds exactly. It sounds like a metronome or a slow, idle engine. I don't know what to do. If I go to the police, they'll commit me. If I go back to the house, I'm dead. Let me start from the beginning. 3 months ago, Sarah and I were desperate. Our landlord had decided to sell our rental duplex, giving us 60 days to vacate. We were in that awful financial dead zone, too rich for assistance, too poor for a turnkey home in a decent neighborhood. We spent weeks touring places that smelled like cat piss and despair, watching our savings account look smaller and smaller against the rising interest rates. Then we found 1208 Sycamore. It popped up on Zillow at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. No photos, just a vague description. Newly renovated, 3-bed, 2-bath, motivated seller, cash only, or rapid closing preferred. The price was $150,000 under market value. I thought it was a scam. Sarah thought it was a murder house. We called the agent at 8 a.m. By noon, we were standing in the driveway. The house was gorgeous. It was a sprawling, single-story ranch with a flat roof and floor-to-ceiling windows, nestled into a dense patch of woods that seemed to lean away from the structure, as if the trees were afraid to touch it. The exterior was painted a dark, matte charcoal. The agent, a jittery man named Mr. Kane, who smelled like peppermint and stale sweat, met us at the door. "It's a flip," Kane said, his eyes darting around the yard. "The investor ran out of liquidity, needs to offload the asset immediately, as is." We walked inside, and the silence hit me first. You know how empty houses usually have an echo, a hollow, lonely sound? This place didn't echo. The air felt heavy, almost pressurized, like the cabin of an airplane. The floors were pristine, polished concrete. The walls were a creamy, flawless white. No scuffs, no nail holes, no dust. "It feels solid," Sarah whispered, grabbing my hand. "Insulation," Kane said quickly. "Double-thick soundproofing, top of the line. You could scream in here, and nobody outside would hear a thing." He laughed, a dry barking sound, then stopped abruptly. "Energy efficient." We walked through the rooms. The layout was strange, long hallways that seemed to curve imperceptibly. The kitchen was ultra-modern, stainless steel and black marble. But there were oddities. The doors were heavy, solid steel cores, painted to look like wood. The windows didn't open. They were fixed panes of glass that felt incredibly thick. HVAC is a closed-loop system, pure air filtration. You never need to open a window. No pollen, no bugs. Sarah fell in love with the master bath. I fell in love with the garage, a massive 2-car space with high ceilings. We made an offer that afternoon. They accepted an hour later. We waived the inspection to sweeten the deal. I know, that's rule number 1 of what not to do. But we were desperate, and the house looked perfect. We moved in 2 weeks later. The first month was idyllic. The house was amazing. It stayed a perfect 68 degrees regardless of the weather. We slept better than we ever had. It was so quiet. But then the little things started happening. It began with the cleaning. One Friday night, we had a few friends over for a housewarming. My buddy Dave got a little too enthusiastic with his red wine and spilled a glass on the pristine white rug in the living room. "Oh God, Mark, I'm so sorry," he stammered. "Don't worry about it," I said, rushing to get paper towels. I dabbed at it, but the red stain was deep. I told him I'd rent a steamer in the morning. We went to bed late. I woke up at 7 a.m. to get a glass of water. When I walked into the living room, the rug was white. Not mostly white, perfectly white. I got down on my knees and hands. I sniffed the fabric. It smelled like bleach and ozone. There was no trace of the wine. I assumed Sarah had woken up early and scrubbed it,
driven by anxiety. When she woke up, I thanked her. "For what?" she asked. "The rug. You did a hell of a job." She looked at me confused. "I didn't touch the rug, Mark. I was passed out cold." We laughed it off. Maybe the rug was stain-resistant. Maybe we were drunker than we thought. Then things went missing. Small things. A paring knife, a screwdriver, one of Sarah's earrings. We'd put something down on the counter, turn around, and 10 minutes later it was gone. The turning point was the basement door. There wasn't supposed to be a basement. The listing said slab foundation. But 3 weeks in, I was moving boxes in the back of the pantry and found a seam in the wall. I pushed it. With a hydraulic hiss, a section of the wall popped inward and slid sideways. Behind it was a staircase. I called Sarah. "You have to see this." She stood in the pantry, hugging her elbows. "I don't like it, Mark. It smells down there." It did smell. It smelled like copper and wet earth. But I grabbed a flashlight and went down. The stairs were concrete, steep and narrow. At the bottom I found a room, maybe 10 by 10. The walls were unfinished, just bare studs and pink insulation batting. In the center of the room was a single metal chair and a workbench. On the workbench were blueprints. I dusted them off. They were old, dated 1974, but they weren't architectural drawings. The title block read Project Vivarium, Subunit 4. I unrolled the main sheet. It showed the floor plan of our house, but the labels were wrong. Instead of living room, it said Digestive Tract A. Instead of master bedroom, it said Incubation Chamber. "What is this?" Sarah asked from the top of the stairs. "Just a weird joke from the previous owner," I lied. I rolled up the blueprints and took them with me. I didn't tell her that underneath the blueprints, I found a pile of nails. Not clippings, whole nails.
I sealed the pantry door. I tried to forget about it, but the house started to change. I noticed the walls felt warmer. Not the air, the actual drywall. If you leaned your hand against the hallway wall, it felt like pressing your palm against a feverish forehead. Then came the sounds. At night, lying in bed, I could hear fluids moving. It wasn't the whoosh of water in copper pipes. It was a thick, rhythmic gurgle. Slurp, thump, slurp, thump. It came from inside the walls. Sarah started acting strange 2 weeks ago. She stopped leaving the house. She called out of work for a migraine and just never went back. She spent hours just standing in the living room, staring at the blank white wall. "Sarah?" I'd ask. "It's peaceful," she'd say, not turning around. "Can't you hear it singing?" "The house? It loves us, Mark. It wants to keep us safe." I tried to get her to go to dinner, to see a movie, just to get out. She refused. She became aggressive if I tried to open the front door. "Don't let the bad air in," she'd scream, her eyes wide and terrified. I decided I needed to investigate the walls. I waited until Sarah was asleep, or in her trance state, in the bedroom. I took my drill and a drywall saw to the guest room, the room furthest from her. I picked a spot behind the dresser. I wanted to see the plumbing. I wanted to prove to myself that the gurgling was just old pipes and the blueprints were a prank. I drilled a pilot hole. When the drill bit punched through the drywall, a spray of hot red liquid hissed out, hitting me in the face. I recoiled, dropping the drill. I wiped my eyes. It looked like blood, but it smelled like transmission fluid and rot. The hole in the wall was pulsing. I grabbed the drywall saw. My hands were shaking. I started to cut a square. The drywall didn't crumble like gypsum. It felt spongy. It offered resistance like cutting through tough meat. I pulled the square section free. I wasn't looking at insulation. The space between the studs was filled with a translucent pinkish webbing. Veins, thick as my thumb and blue-black, pulsed rhythmically, carrying the fluid I'd just released. And the studs, they weren't wood. They were bone, massive, fused vertebrae that ran floor to ceiling. The house wasn't built. It was grown. I backed away, gagging. The square of drywall in my hand was warm. On the backside, the side facing the veins, it was covered in tiny moving cilia. Suddenly, the house screamed. It wasn't a sound in the air. It was a vibration that shook my teeth. The floorboards rippled. The door to the guest room slammed shut. The lock clicked, a sharp, bone-snapping sound. I ran to the door. It wouldn't budge. It had fused to the frame. The seam where the door met the jamb was gone, replaced by rapidly growing white tissue that looked like scar tissue. "Mark!" Sarah yelled from the hallway, but her voice sounded wrong, distorted. "Mark, run! Get out of the house!" I screamed, kicking the door. "Why are you hurting it?" she asked. She was right outside the door. "It's only trying to digest." Digest? I looked at the window, the thick, fixed glass. I grabbed the heavy metal lamp from the nightstand and swung it with everything I had. Thud. The glass didn't break. It didn't even crack. It felt rubbery, absorbing the blow. I hit it again and again. The room was getting smaller. I swear to God, the walls were expanding inward. The ceiling was lowering. The red liquid from the wall was pooling on the floor, and where it touched the carpet, the fibers were dissolving into a gray sludge. I needed tools. My toolbox was in the garage. I was trapped in the guest room. Then I remembered the closet. The guest room closet shared a wall with the garage. I ran to the closet. I didn't bother with the drill. I started kicking the back wall. I kicked until my heel bruised. The drywall, the skin, bruised purple and yellow, but it started to tear. I clawed at it with my bare hands. It was wet and hot. I ripped through the webbing, snapping the veins. The fluid sprayed over me, burning my skin like acid. I found the bone studs and squeezed between them. I fell through into the garage, landing on the concrete. The garage was cold. It seemed the organism hadn't fully overtaken this part of the house yet. I scrambled up, grabbing a sledgehammer from my pegboard. I had to get Sarah.
I ran to the door leading into the kitchen. It was stuck. I swung the sledgehammer. The door splintered. It was still wood here. I stepped into the kitchen. The transformation was accelerating. The stainless steel appliances were sinking into the floor, which had become soft and fleshy. The refrigerator was groaning, its metal frame bending as if being crushed by a giant hand. "Sarah!" I found her in the living room. She was standing in the center of the room, but she wasn't standing on the floor. The floor had risen up to her knees. A thick white substance, like hardening wax or cartilage, was crawling up her legs. It had fused her pajama pants to her skin. She was smiling. Her eyes were glazed over, entirely black. No whites, no irises, just void. "It's warm, Mark. We don't need jobs anymore. We don't need money. We just need to be processed." "No!" I rushed forward, swinging the sledgehammer at the stuff trapping her legs. It was like hitting a truck tire. The hammer bounced back, vibrating up my arms. I swung again. The white substance cracked, oozing yellow pus. Sarah shrieked, "Don't! You're hurting us! I'm getting you out of here!" I dropped the hammer and grabbed her under the arms. I pulled. She screamed in agony. The substance was grafted to her skin. "Let go!" she yelled. And then she did something that haunts me. Her neck turned 180 degrees. Her neck snapped with a wet crunch, but she kept talking. "The house is hungry, Mark. You have so much potential." The walls of the living room were undulating. The ceiling was dripping a clear, viscous slime. A mouth was forming in the ceiling, a sphincter-like opening directly above us, lined with rows of jagged porcelain teeth that looked suspiciously like toilet ceramic shards. I pulled harder. Her skin started to tear. "Sarah, please! Join us!" she gurgled. The floor beneath me suddenly softened. My boot sank in. It was trying to grab me, too. I looked at my wife, the thing that used to be my wife. The white cartilage had reached her waist. Her skin was turning the same creamy white as the walls. She was becoming part of the structure. I realized then that I couldn't save her. If I stayed another 10 seconds, I would be part of the digestion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I let her go. She didn't fall. The floor held her upright. She just watched me, her head twisted backward, smiling that black-eyed smile. I ran for the front door. It was gone. The wall had sealed over it completely.
The windows were covered in cataracts, opaque and milky. I ran back to the kitchen. The garage door I'd smashed was healing, white tendrils knitting across the opening. I dove through the hole just as it closed, scraping my back on the sharpening edges. I was in the garage. I hit the button for the garage door opener. Nothing. The motor whined and died. I ran to the manual release cord. I yanked it. The tracks rattled but didn't lift. The tracks were fused. I got in my truck, my 2015 Ford F-150. I started the engine. I threw it in reverse. I floored it. The truck slammed into the garage door. Metal crunched. The door buckled but didn't break. The house shuddered. I heard a roar, not structural but vocal, a deep, bellowing roar of pain and rage. I shifted to drive, pulled forward a few feet, and shifted to reverse again. Bam! The door tore open. Sunlight, beautiful, blinding sunlight, flooded in. I sped down the driveway. I didn't look back until I was at the end of the street. When I looked in the rearview mirror, 1208 Sycamore looked normal. The dark paint, the flat roof, the trees leaning away, it sat there, perfectly still, perfectly silent. I drove for 6 hours. I stopped at a gas station to wash the blood and slime off my arms. The clerk looked at me like a monster. Maybe I am. I left my wife to be digested by a house. I bought a burner phone and checked the listing for the house online. It's updated. Status, pending. Price, $100,000. Description, newly vacated. Features upgraded biological integration system. Needs feeding. I'm sitting in this motel room and I'm terrified. Not just because of what happened. I'm terrified because about an hour ago, I noticed something about this motel room. The carpet, it's perfectly clean. I spilled some coffee earlier, and the stain is already gone. And the walls, they feel warm. I think I hear a heartbeat in the floor. I don't think I escaped. I think the house is part of a network, like mycelium, like a root system that spans miles. I'm gonna go to the bathroom and check the drywall behind the mirror. If I see veins, I'm gonna use the gun I bought at the pawn shop an hour ago. If you're reading this, never buy a flip. Never buy a house that's too quiet. And if the walls feel warm, run. Run until you can't run anymore. Update. I pulled the mirror off the wall. There's no drywall. It's just Sarah's face, stretched out, massive, part of the wall. She's whispering my name. The door to the motel room just disappeared. Submitted 2 hours ago by Homeowner 99. Top comment. Skeptic Builder. Architect here. The closed-loop HVAC line is always a red flag, but usually it just means mold, not digestive acid. Also, $150K under market? You get what you pay for, OP. Biotech nerd. OP, did the blueprints have a corporate logo? There was a rumor about a startup in the 70s trying to grow organic bomb shelters. They went under when the prototypes started eating the cleaning staff.